Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Media's weekly show H panel. Today we are full house with uh, Skel Gapisa, Faisal Roble, and Yusuf Kabrahewat. And welcome, man. Today we'll be talking about the current state of affairs of Ethiopia. But as usual, we will start with the first question of the panel. That is what stood out for each panelist. So again, those who are following us live, we are on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Please share, so that many can access our material. Current state of affairs of Ethiopia. Uh, Professor Sgel Gabisa, Faisal Roble, Yusuf Gabriel are back in the panel. Sgel, what stood out for you over the past week?
It's been a while since we met here, so a lot had transpired in the last 2 or 3 weeks that I have not been able to attend. But this week, what stood out for me is it's not just one event; it is about two events that happened world apart, involving two personalities and who are playing on world stage. The event the events took place in two cities considered to be the second or third largest platforms of the United Nations, Geneva and Addis Ababa. The first is the appointment of Dr. Tedros Adhanom to a second term as Director General of the World Health Organization. Now, this kind of appointments, it's significant because United Nations organizations are going to affect the lives of many around the world. As it is, though, it's simple bureaucratic affair, devoid of drama, fanfare, and pageantry. But this one was different. It was different in the sense that the standing ovation was not just a normal event. It was meant, in my opinion, to send a signal to the government of Ethiopia that opposed to support Ethiopia's own citizen when he is reappointed with the support of 155 countries out of 160 that attended or that had the right to vote. 155 from all regions of the globe, all organizations. It is almost a unanimous verdict on the work that Dr. Tedros Adhanom had done in the last 5 years. Tumultuous years for him with new and old epidemics and pandemics, but he demonstrated that he's not just up to the task, but that he passed with flying colors, that he received the endorsement of nearly all countries of the world, save a few countries, which included his own country, who opposed his reappointment on the world stage. Because his own country did not support him, it looked at this standing ovation, as far as I'm concerned, was meant to send a message to the Ethiopian government. So the minutes long standing ovation was not just a resounding endorsement of Dr. Adhanom and the work he has done, but also a message to the Addis Ababa government of a resounding rejection of what they stand for. The second was Addis Ababa, which is also considered as the third platform of the United Nations, where the country's prime minister received news that the Time magazine has selected him as one of 100 influential personalities in the world. To be honest, the Ethiopian media thought that he was selected for something good that he had done on the world stage, only to know that this was a selection, an influencer in a very bad way, and notoriety, not an honor. So the total repudiation of the work that Abiy Ahmed Ali has done as Prime Minister of Ethiopia. He was selected as one of the 100 notorious personalities that is going to affect our world, us in the news and actually in what happens in that country. To be named as one of the notorious personalities in the world is one thing, and if you were a wise person, you wouldn't complain about it, because complaining about it would prolong the news cycle. But Abiy Ahmed's, the Ethiopian Prime Minister's office, complained that he was unfairly targeted, unfairly caricatured, and that uh, uh, the Time magazine had not paid attention to all sides, so they were unfair. So, two events that happened in different places, but that showed one thing, that the world thinks that Ethiopia is adrift, Ethiopia is directionless, that Ethiopia is rudderless, opposing their own citizen when he had a good day on the world stage. That Ethiopia is a leaderless country. That is basically what stood out for me. Two events that showed Ethiopia is really adrift, rudderless, disoriented, and leaderless.
Thank you. Thank you. Faisal?
Thank you very much, and thanks for that assessment of Tedros's welcome. I totally agree with Skial. I think it was more of a repudiation, because in normal circumstances, this is a bureaucratic process to nominate or even nominate, but it was a message. I just want to, have that rejoinder. I think two small things stood up for me. The first one is the devastation in northern, if you will, in Tigray and in Amara and Afar region. I attended the USAID's briefing of Ethiopians this week, and the numbers are staggering in terms of what had happened and how that devastation is deep, and it will take really years and years to recover from that. And I'm not even talking about the devastation is in Oromia, in Benishangul, in other parts of Ethiopia, which I think will also catch up with the devastation. But now, because of the USAID and the Western countries mainly focusing on the northern, so-called northern Ethiopia, that in itself is really another indictment of the current leadership in Addis Ababa. Just to throw some numbers, about 9 million Ethiopians in Tigray, Amara region, and Afar are what you call food insecure, meaning that they don't know if they will get the next meal or even if they get a meal, depending on where they are. Another 2.4 million people fled their homes, particularly in between Tigray and in Amara. And as I said, this doesn't account for Oromia or Benishangul and other regions. And 90% of the people today, according to the USAID, who live in Tigray, need aid at different levels and at various levels. But 90%, which is really like the entire Tigray region's population, need food. Now, we have been witnessing the Ethiopian government in Addis Ababa playing food as a weapon and weaponizing food. And that tells you, if you show that graph, that tells you how food is now Prime Minister Abiy's a tool to really make sure that he punishes TDF, TPLF, and Tigray by just letting food come in drips, so that the numbers that developed between March 24, when the truce was signed between the two, and today, it's just increasing slowly to a point where in the beginning, no food was let go into Tigray, and then it suddenly rose between March 24 up to the entire March. So the first graph is weekly, and it was increasing, and then the second graph that you see with the sharp uptick is from March to May, which increased literally from zero going there to up to this point 900 trucks reaching Tigray as we speak. And I think it's May 19th, that date, which is the 900 mark. Now, people may think that 900 is big, but according to AID's own numbers, a legitimate satisfactory level, meaning C- level for Tigray to receive aid in order to sustain livability is 500 trucks a day, not a week, 500 trucks a week. And you can see that it's not there, and this is intentional according to AID. They don't have really much of impediments in terms of not having the food or not having the trucks. It's the Ethiopian government that is really utilizing its power to make sure that food is used in this way. Having said that, AID believes that it spent 976 million US dollars on food aid to just fight this famine situation. Out of that $976 million, $800 million came straight from USAID. What do these numbers and figures and food aid mean? I think I gleaned one big thing in terms of public policy from this. I think, and some of the conversations that we had, I think U.S. government has changed its policy towards Ethiopia. There is a softer edge or a soft part of the Biden administration towards Abiy Ahmed's government. They want to tame him. They want to treat him with kid gloves. And I think they want to get away from politics to an extent and focus more on what they call relief. They think that is where their positive impact lies. So I think the emphasis that the U.S. government is now putting more on the relief is, in my opinion, it wants to walk away from its earlier engagement in the political aspect of the country. Whether they will do that behind the scene, I am not sure, but I think they see focusing on the relief situation, and most of the talks that we used to see before from the United States government is literally deaf. It went deaf in the last few months, I would say 2-3 months. I think that's the big thing that stood out for me, but I cannot forget also the new war that the Abiy government started on the Amhara region. Somebody may say it's right or wrong. In this platform, we often talked about the fact that the Asmara, Bahrdar, and Arat Kilo tripartite axis of relationship is not sustainable. I think it showed its cracks as we speak today, but Abiy, true to his nature, is not handling that issue itself in a very judicious way. I think although Fano has its own issues and problems, but the way information is coming from the Amara area, some of us are afraid that it's a replay of what had happened in Tigray and in Oromia region, because it's telling that Abiy understands only one politics, and that's the politics of the gun and coercion and intimidation, and that's exactly taking place in the Amhara region. Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal. Yosef, you are muted. Let me see. Yeah, now you are back.
Okay. All right. Okay. What stood out for me was, of course, the Eritrean Independence Day, celebrated all over the world. And what attracted my attention here is not even the speech given by Isaias as usual, although it's a subject matter on its own. This time around, it was short. He never said Wayani in the entire speech, and he even seems to be somewhat conciliatory towards the end. But that's not where I want to focus. I am more impressed by the visual part of the parades and the dance halls that were conducted in different parts of the world. Why? Because the Achilles heel of Eritrea is its demography. Hundreds of thousands of Eritreans, especially the young, have been fleeing Eritrea in these 20 years Now it's probably almost 1 million of them. Almost a quarter of the people of Eritrea have left the country in the past 20 years. Now, just by looking at these different celebrations in different parts of the world, you could almost solve the demographic jigsaw puzzle of Eritrea. Let me start with Asmara. In the parades that were conducted in Asmara, there was a group, the women that were at the forefront of the parades were the mothers. Almost all of them above 40 years, in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. What were entirely absent were younger mothers in their 20s and 30s were almost absent from the parades. And the question is, where are they? Another part is, if you see the young people, almost all of them were underage. You don't see young men, except the ones who were conducting military parades, which were, of course, brought from all over Eritrea. Else than that, you don't see also young men in the parades. And then, so the demography of Asmara is more or less older people, women, even the women older than younger people, and then the underage ones. Now the riddle began to be solved. If you go to Addis Ababa and you see that the celebrations of Eritrean independence that were conducted there in Addis Ababa, there you suddenly see the women that are not that you don't see you haven't seen in the streets of Asmara. These women were younger, in their 20s, most of them in their 20s. The young men, they were more or less in their 20s and 30s. These were in Addis Ababa. And then, if you go all the way to Libya, you see another celebration of Independence Day. These were also a young crowd, but conspicuously absent were the women. A few women, almost overwhelmingly men, precisely because the journey from Sudan to Libya is a very precarious one and mainly conducted by men. So these are the people that are waiting to cross the Mediterranean. Many of them have died in the Mediterranean and in the Sahara Desert. And yet they were celebrating with the picture of Isaias Afwerki. They were celebrating their Independence Day in Libya. Then, if we go all the way across the Mediterranean to London, you see a different demography. This time around, the women are not as young as the ones in Addis Ababa, the ones that were celebrating in Addis Ababa, but they were a little bit older, more or less in their 30s. You could see kids with them. So you see, now if you put the entire these four the population of these four corners together, the jigsaw puzzle fits. That is the fate of what is happening now in Eritrea. It's almost like it's a nation. It's a sinking ship. And just by focusing on the visuals only, you could see the plight of Eritrea. That was what was the most notable thing that to me was kind of interesting to look at in the past week. Thank you.
Thank you, Yosef. And we start the main topic of the day. So the current state of affairs of Ethiopia. A number of things are happening in North, in Amhara region, in Tigray, in Oromia, and so on. So maybe you will have a different insight in terms of where the state of affairs are. So, Scale, speak to that subject.
Yeah, I think maybe about more than a month ago, we talked about what was going on in Ethiopia. I think Ethiopia is basically a failed state right now. If a country does not have a military to defend its borders, if a country doesn't have an economy to support its governing structures, if a country doesn't have the diplomatic acumen that it needs to navigate the labyrinthine realm of global diplomacy, if the country doesn't have the administrative structure to govern in the country, then that, by all accounts, that the country is basically a failed state. What Ethiopians are saying today about the country is Mangist Yallam. Where is the state? Or the state doesn't exist. That's basically what you hear throughout the country, including in the capital city, because armed marauders are all over the place. Under various previous dictatorships that I lived under, for instance, the Derg, you know where to be careful. You understand what not to do, where not to go, and what not to say. But the government, the tentacles of the government that actually touch the individual at the lowest rungs, they are there. You can feel them. They control you through the urban precincts, the qabales. You can feel the government is there. Under those dictatorships, they did not lose control like this one has appears to be finding itself descending into. Is that the structure functions, and people are saying that there is no government because they feel this thing, where the government is telling the Ethiopian masses that this is the country that is on a country on the hill, a light on the hill, and telling individuals who are hungry, well, you're hungry because you chose to. That's the response from this government. Well, all of those things that a government or a state requires to make sure that the people feel that the government is there, don't exist, because in the capital city of Addis Ababa, you really don't know who is going to come and stop you and maybe take you to a private prison. Who is going to pull the Kalashnikov on you? You really don't know. Armed marauders are all over the place. There is no capacity that this government wills to monopolize the violence. It's everywhere. Violence is everywhere, even in the capital city. So it's a failed state. It is a state without administration. It's a state without economy. It's a state without diplomatic acumen. It's a state without military. It's a state without law enforcement capacities. The reason why the country is still on the map is that the people are trying to just live one day at a time. Other than that, Ethiopia is basically a failed state. The government is under siege. All of these multi-dimensional crises. It's under siege, and the government is actually showing that it is almost buckling under the weight of economic, political, military, diplomatic, and other pressures that is being applied to it from all directions.
Thank you. Faisal?
Yeah, I will just take from there. And I think, yes, Ethiopia has failed a while ago as a state. It hasn't crumpled yet. It hasn't really disintegrated yet. And I think Jawari's description of where Ethiopia is, somebody who is in the heart of the country, that by likening Ethiopia with a bus that is hanging over a cliff, two front tires already over the cliff, with unreliable leader whose record thus far has not been productive or positive, sitting, said it may as well fall over the cliff unless help comes. I don't know where that help would come. I don't think he was very clear where that help comes from. He said we have to all help him, but in a way, helping him is one thing, but I think help the driver of that hanging bus over the cliff with what? To help him with what? You cannot really come back and just appeal to Pax Ethiopia again when we say Ethiopia has failed, unless you completely change the nature of this, if you will, ancient defunct empire. And what are the proposals on the table to pull that bus from the cliff so it doesn't fall? I don't see that. I don't see any proposal on the table to convince, say, Tigray with the genocide that they are claiming to have experienced, to pull the bus from the cliff. What is there that those who are helping the bus to come back to show to the Tigrays? What are they showing to the Oromo Ola branch, whom Jawar himself admitted and said that the worst war is now taking place and being engaged or waged by the Oromia government itself? What are you going to show to the Somalis, who gave a little bit of a room to negotiate with Abiy but feel betrayed today, and they will never trust him? I mean, there has to be a political infrastructure to safeguard that bus hanging, and I don't think I see that at this point in time, especially with Abiy and the course that he is traveling. On top of that, I think Gail touched the economy. I'll just briefly touch how the disintegration is again beyond Addis Ababa. Of course, life in Addis Ababa for the average Ethiopian is unbearable. I mean, we can't go through the prices of what the onion costs or what the infamous Zayt Waga is now. Those became proverbial negative thing to describe the current government and the failure of the government. But just take Jigjiga in the Somali region. In 2000, August, when the note change came, I think it was around 2000, the birr to the dollar was $1 was 35 birr. Today, less than 2 years, the birr is 80. The dollar is 80 birr. We are at a point where the exchange center of the dollar to the birr, i.e. Tawajale, which is the border town of Somaliland, refuses to accept Ethiopia's birr. Here is a small border town, unrecognized by the world, but a business hub that's saying now to Ethiopians who are bringing huge stolen birr from Ethiopia, all the way from Addis Ababa, and Somalilanders are saying, your money is worth of a paper. That's where Ethiopia is today. So basically, the exchange centers in Tagwajale has been closed. They no longer open for business for Ethiopian exchangers. On top of that, when the Somalis said, what's happening with our life that we cannot even buy a sack of sugar or a sack of flour today, the president of the region basically said, look at me. I don't control Ethiopia's national bank. In a sense, he is right. He doesn't control because the National Bank of Ethiopia has failed. Therefore, he's saying, I accept the failure and I have nothing to tell you. This is where regional government leaders are. They are telling their constituents, we are as helpless as you guys are. That is really a telling of how Ethiopia's government and state has failed. It hasn't simply crumpled, and we're waiting for the day it crumples. And the crumbling is not that far. You have seen what's happening in the north. For the first time since Mustafa took power in the Somali region, Isat TV, which used to prop him up and used to see him as Ethiopia's new hero and new news, are now saying that the Somali regional government is hunting down Amara civilians. Whether that's right or true or false, I cannot verify. What I can verify is that they don't even trust today the Amara citizens who are relaying this information to Isat TV and others are not trusting even the very one that they saw as their favorite. So yesterday, Isat TV started its news by saying this: even the one that we thought to be doing better things in Ethiopia, i.e., President Mustafa, is no longer reliable. So those are signs of a faltering, disintegrating administrative system that Scale really touched. The administration has disintegrated. It's being held Ethiopia at two levels, probably by brute force, like in Oromia region and others. Tigray is catering to the wall so that it doesn't get isolated, and Somalis don't know how to rise up, and you can go on and on, but there is no solid national administration that won the hearts of the people to say that Ethiopia is run from a single source of administration and power.
Thank you, Faisal. Yosef? It looks like Yosef is not hearing me.
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
No, oh, do you want me? Yeah, I was not. I mean, it was not audible anyway. Yeah, I'm okay now.
Yes, you are okay now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
All right. Okay. Okay. All right. Uh, well, I mean, both Professor Hizkiel and Faisal have described the state of Ethiopia uh, 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 better than I could, than I ever could. So I have little to add on that, except for what Faisal has been saying in regard to Jawar's interview last time. I think Jawar was very articulate, precise in his words also. Sometimes you have to read in between the lines. And he covered almost every corner of that problem, although to many people it might not be satisfactory here and there. He talked about the political and the military problem, the economic problem, and he also talked a lot about how the civil war in Ethiopia right now is totally of a different kind than we had seen before, which I totally agree. Given the role of the outside forces, both regional and global forces, he did an excellent job in describing that one. But to me, well, I believe that Jawar has failed to either clearly tell us where he stands in certain things, especially when it comes in regard to Tigray. There were about 3 points that I would like to mention. The first one was, as Faisal mentioned it, there was the talk about, the Amhara grievances, that the Amhara grievance should be heard and settled peacefully, rather than the way Abiy is doing it right now, by disarming them, by attacking them in certain cases, and by imprisoning them. A better way should be found in settling this Amhara grievance. I do agree, but the way Jawar put it, it's a bit more than that. He said the government has to engage them, and what we have to unpack is that word, engage them, instead of disarming them. Okay, and we have to put that. What does he mean by engage them? He comes up, he follows it up by saying that there is a sense of betrayal among the Amharas. After what? After this supposedly a negotiation between Mekele and Addis Ababa, that they have been left out, or that they have been sidelined of that negotiation. And now he actually used the word tasatfu, I believe, which means that they should have been participants in this negotiation. So that threw me off, because what exactly does he think the Amharas would demand if they are partners in this negotiation? The Amhara nationalists are no fools. They have clear goals. They have set clear goals. Raya and Wolkite being the main ones. Now, is he trying to tell us? So my feeling was that this kind of engagement has to come at the expense of Tigray. And he doesn't seem to mind that, although he didn't explicitly put it that way. Another one was his stand on Eritrea. He, it's clear that he doesn't want to offend Eritrea, but it goes beyond that. He seems to consciously minimize Eritrea's massive intervention in Tigray. He almost says that Eritrea's intervention in Tigray cannot simply be categorized as a foreign intervention because Eritrea's case is a different case. He says it's different from, for example, from the case what could have been had it been Somalia or Kenya or Sudan. He's almost saying that Eritrea straddles between the internal and the external, and hence its intervention has to be seen in a different way. He seems to condone that idea. He keeps minimizing Eritrea's role with that it has been a massive one. It has no less than genocide has been conducted in Tigray. Never mentions genocide or that the fact that Tigray is under siege right now. And then there is an additional one that also amazed me because the same way he felt that the Amhara grievances are because of the Mekelle and Addis Ababa negotiation that is evolving right now, he believes the same also holds in regard to Eritrea. He said that because of this, Eritrea shouldn't feel isolated because of this peace process that is going on between, supposedly, I'm not even sure whether it's going on, but supposedly going on between Abiy and Tigray leaders. Eritrea shouldn't feel isolated about in this case. So to me, I am not sure exactly where he is heading, but the containment of Tigray seems to underlie all this hedging around Tigray, both in his take in regard to the Amhara nationalists or expansionists and to the Eritrean intervention. So I was kind of disappointed in that regard. But else than that, again, both Scale and Faisal have described the state of Eritrea than I could ever do. So thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. You can reflect on what the other panelists said. But my question for the second round, before the final words for today, is given what we know now and what we see is happening in Tigray or not happening, what's happening in Amhara, in Somali, in Oromia, and elsewhere in the Ethiopia, and the Somali factor, Somalia election, and Eritrean um, role, all that. Where do you see? I mean, it's very hard. It's a big gamble, I know, to see how things would play out in the coming weeks. But what's your take on with regard to what the future holds in Ethiopia? Scale.
I think what he described about Ethiopia and the whole region, one must be able to see it with rather clear morality and realism. I happen to be someone influenced by the foremost 20th century Christian public theologian whose influence on United States foreign policy in the latter part of 20th century is noted, Reinhold Niebuhr. His influence on American foreign policy politicians extends from John McCain to Barack Obama, Madeleine Albright, George Kennan, um, people who really made the American foreign policy in the last century, whether that is containment, the doctrine of containment, and others as well, that he was a tremendous influence with his view of Christian realism. It is about realism, but looking at international relations from the perspective of moral clarity. Not everything is about politics. There comes a time when politics recedes and moral clarity takes precedence. Within this framework of realism, Niebuhr himself, who is, by the way, a Christian theologian who is supposed to be an anti-war, which he was before the Second World War, he became the supporter of American action in the Second World War. He supported anti-communist stance that the United States government had, and he even supported the development of nuclear weapons. That's not what clergy are supposed to do. But while many clergy proclaimed themselves in the second half of the 20th century as pacifists, and they were opposed to all kinds of war and war experiences, Niebuhr declared himself that victory over Germany and Japan and Italy is necessary. That a war is necessary because he based in arguments and saying in his belief that there is evil in the world. There is evil in the world. It comes and goes, it recedes, it protrudes, but there is evil in the world. So he says, even as a Christian, that there's times where justice must take precedence over love, and that pacifism is a symbol of portrayal of absolute love. It is, but it cannot prevent evil. So if there is evil in the world, if it is expressing itself in the forms of Nazism, fascism, militarism, there is no point in seeking peace with evil. You can't look for accommodating evil. You have to be able to see with moral clarity. There is no way to accommodate evil. There is no way there is no place for evil to be accommodated. That cannot happen. What will happen? Ethiopia is under siege. Its government is under siege. The Amara government is against the federal government. The Tigray government is against the federal government. The Amara government is against the Tigray government. The federal government is against the OLA in Oromia. The federal government is at war with Benishangul Gumuz. The Amara government is at war with Command, with Benishangul Gumuz as well. This is a war of all against all. And its source, the source of civil war, is that there is evil in Addis Ababa. There is evil in Addis Ababa. We have seen it express itself all over the country. When you toss a human body into fire, we have seen it. When you plan a premeditated attack on worshippers in Gondar, when you kill them, when you kill worshippers who are burying their dead, when you burn mosques and then jump up and down around it, when the government itself, when the clergy in Addis Ababa are blessing tanks so that they can go kill, there is evil in Addis Ababa. There is evil. And evil, you struggle with it. Evil, you cleanse it. You don't accommodate it. What happens is that evil must be cleansed. Evil must be cleansed. Otherwise, that country, that region, the entire continent of Africa is not going to attain peace. The international community must understand that there is evil in Addis Ababa that had conducted ethnic cleansing, genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, crimes against peace, crimes against development. That kind of government, how do you make peace with evil? You don't. So how it ends The international community, as I've said before, must take action. Otherwise, they will come to reap the results of evil, and they're going to regret. They're going to regret that they stood by evil when it was happening. What is unfolding in Ethiopia is appeasing evil, and we know where appeasement led. We know the never light when it led. So this thing must end, and it must end with ending evil, not accommodating it.
Thank you, Scale. Faisal, how do you see the things play out?
Well, I think Ethiopia is in a very precarious situation. The question is whether it can be saved from war, but whether that civil war would be an all-out war, and the government just takes sides, or it falters and then breaks up. That's where we are. You cannot really just go from that point. The question is, there are two schools of thoughts already emerging from the political scene, and one school of thought believes that everything that Scale touched in terms of the evilness of the administration in Addis Ababa can be forgiven, and it can be reimagined, and things would go normal. Atrocities, ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, massive rape in many parts of the country, but particularly in Tigray, keeping people alive. The prime minister is key people, cancer and weed to be cleansed from the human body. All those, some people believe somehow magically they can wish that away. I don't know. I'm not one of those people who think that's possible. I think the other school of thought is what Scale described, which is getting rid of the evil. And and I think the forces that wanted that school of thought or supported that school of thought are not really organized, nor are they in the same. Ola is probably one of them. I'm not sure if TDF or TPLF is even included in that school of thought that says evil must be eliminated, therefore Al Kilo must be changed. I'm not sure if TPLF is at that point. I know Ola is that, but is Ola enough for that? I'm not sure. In between, you have a lot. I think at the end of the day, what it will be is, just questions that we can raise without having the answers. Is Abiy a short-term transition so that some people who initially saw the evil as evil are now softening their language? Is it because they want to see Abiy transitioning and then they can replace him? Are some of the political parties in Addis Ababa softening their edge because they know something that Abiy cannot continue, therefore they are the inheritors of that? After all, politics and morality don't go together in some circles. I agree with what Scale was saying. I think politics needs a good dose of morality, but politicians don't see that. So I don't know if Abiy gets green light from some circles within the groups that challenged him in the past. He thinks by pacifying them, he can also pacify the entire country. I really don't think that the Tigray condition should be equated to the Amhara condition by any means. I don't think the Ola struggle should be only limited to a fight against its own regional government. I think Ola is fighting against the federal government for substantive issue. That's why I said initially when I was commenting on my friend's talk of the cliff, of the bus hanging over the cliff, which I totally agree. Ethiopia is a bus that's hanging over the cliff. What are the tools? What are the ideological and political and moral, to add Scali's point, and moral infrastructure to address both current issues and most recent issues that we have witnessed, as well as historical issues of Ethiopia. If you don't combine those two, you just become another rhetorical politician who wants to maintain the status quo. And we have seen 100 and plus years in Ethiopia to nurse the status quo, it never worked. So I think getting it down to the real issues of, self-expression, self-determination, people having the right to decide what's good for their people and their region, and then talk about what's good for the region in general is the only solution, in my opinion.
Thank you, Faisal. Yusuf?
Okay, well, if we are talking about the evil that both Hezkel and Faisal has been talking about, first I say amen to their proposals, but I would like also to remind us that that evil started from Asmara. So it's not only Addis Ababa, the seat of evil is started in Asmara. I believe it started in the Jeddah Accord in 2018, when they created an alliance of dictators. That was the start of the evil that we are talking about today. And if you look at what is happening right now, I mean, to be realistic, to give a realistic dose into what we are talking about, this alliance of dictators is crumbling right now. We have seen in Somalia, Formaggio is already gone, and the alliance between Isaias and Abiy is not as it used to be before. With the withdrawal of the Eritrean forces from Western Tigray, the link between the Amharas and the Amhara forces and Eritrea is almost severed right now. Eritrea is in panic right now because it's finding itself more and more isolated, and the more it gets isolated, it fears that regime change is in the air, especially engineered by the US. But to me, the other part is the one that comes from the outside. If you have noticed, from 9/11, starting 9/11, the prism through which the US was looking at the Horn of Africa was anti-terrorism. That was the only one that was determining the American policy in that area. Now it has suddenly shifted to the Ukraine policy. The Ukraine policy, and it has started. It's almost as if overnight, the U.S. is looking at the entire area, at the conflict in the entire area as a proxy war of the Ukraine Russian war in Europe. You could see that, for example, in the case of Eritrea. In the case of Eritrea, one, we have seen how Eritrea voted in the United Nations with Russia, but that's not the only part. What America is afraid, what the US is afraid, is that Isaias eventually will provide a base to Russia in Eritrea, and that would be a huge thing, precisely because Russia has only two places now, which they call warm water ports. One is in Sevastopol, in Crimea. The other is in Syria. And if it gets the Eritrean one at a very sensitive area, that will be the third one. So for Russia, it's a big deal. And the US is set to prevent that. And it seems that now Eritrea has understood. I don't know whether it's calculated blunder, and as a result of that, there is panic inside Eritrea at this moment. in addition to what's going on, its isolation from the rest of its allies. So I am not sure, we are hoping, in fact, Faisal was talking about the US policy softening. Uh, we see the US policy softening when it comes to its policy in Ethiopia and Eritrea, in that area. I believe part of that has to do with the Ukraine policy. It believes now that it has somehow to make an ally of Ethiopia, given that Ethiopia, it's a big nation, it's in the Horn of Africa, and more or less many African nations also. It influences many African nations, given that it's the seat of AU. And in all this, at one time, if you remember, Zelensky wanted to address the African leaders. He didn't do it, but it was for a reason he wanted to do it at that time. And I believe that somehow what is complicating the issue in our area at this point in time is the shift of the U.S. policy after the UK. I mean, after the Ukrainian and Russian war started. I will stop there. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Yosef. So we are closing the show today with the usual final thoughts. What's your parting thoughts for today, Scale?
I just want to continue with what I was saying about the problem that we have, we face. It all emanates from one source. The country is on the verge of disintegration, no doubt about that. There is only death and dislocation, death and displacement in the country. Ethiopia last week became the country with the highest number of displaced persons, with 5 million people in the world, in the entire world. Economic dislocation, administrative dismantlement, political dismemberment. What kind of administration in the world survives with this kind of record? What kind of administration would survive with this kind of record? And lo and behold, some politicians think that we're stuck with Abiy Ahmed. After all, this is a parliamentary democracy or parliamentary system. With a single vote of confidence, the administration could go down, or the prime minister party leader could be changed. This has happened in Ethiopia itself, when the EPRDF regime was unable to contain the protest that was engulfing the country. Haile Mariam Desalegn resigned. What is that is holding us back, politicians in the country, to call for the resignation of Abiy Ahmed? This is the record. The record is clear. Over the last 40 years, we have seen devastation of biblical proportions. We have seen it. Is there any dispute about it? And then ask Ethiopians and ask everybody else, are you better off right now? Are you better off than you were 4 years ago when he took over? Are you better off? That's the question for Ethiopians. Is the international community better off dealing with a rational person? That they're always talking about there is no replacement. They always ask that question, but there have always been replacement. A replacement has come around. Now, is there peace in the country? Is there prosperity in the country? Are the person of Ethiopian citizens, is it protected? The property protected? What is it that people are waiting for? What is the reason that this man should remain one day in office? Why is it that, whether that is in the international community or even local politicians, why is it that they cannot call for the resignation of Abiy Ahmed Ali with this clear record of 4 years? Why is it that we can't call that? It's not like you're stuck with a presidential system where all citizens of a country had elected one president, and that it is the president is going to remain in office for 4 years unless he's impeached. This is not what it is. The Ethiopia is a parliamentary system. Abiy Ahmed was not elected by all Ethiopians. Tigray is not represented in the government of Ethiopia today. The Somali region voted after the government was established. This is not even a representative government. Why is it that with clear moral clarity and say that this is evil, this must end in one voice, whether that is from the international community or from the inside? You're going to die anyways if you are in the country. You're going to die anyways. Your body is going to be tossed alive into the fiery pit. Why is it that there is no moral clarity? There should be moral clarity. He must go, and everybody must call for his departure.
Thank you, Skill. Faisal, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think there is a chance that the autocratic circle or tripartite autocratic group that was created at the behest of Isaias Afewerki in 2018 and then capsulated by a joint communique in 2020 between Eritrea, Isaias, Abiy's Ethiopia, and Somalia's Farmajo, as Yosef touched, is crumbling. I don't expect the new Somali president, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, to bring that back. I think that gives Prime Minister Abiy to hang on to power. And also you go around and tell some folks that he is not hopeless, is the role of the international community, particularly the US. And I think Yosef also touched that because of international competition for the Horn, Abiy could be getting some new darling friends simply based on strategic interests. And number one of those darling friends could be in a renewed interest with Abiy. See, America is a country of contradiction. I'm not one of those people who expect big things from America. It's a country really that claims to be democratic, but if you go back to the history of America, it always opposed democratic forces. It is a country that says its independence came as a war of revolutionary, but throughout history, it opposed revolutionary wars, particularly in the Horn of Africa. It always was an impediment to the aspirations of the people of the Horn of Africa. It's a country that really, on the one hand, says it funds human rights, but it also deals and makes big business with countries that are known to violate human rights. Ethiopia is not exception to that. As I said frequently, they dealt with Marcos, they dealt with Mobutu Sese, they dealt with Hifat Bonye. So for those of us who expect America to change the cards, I am sorry to say that they will be hugely disappointed, because it's in the nature of the American political infrastructure to maintain dictatorism in the interests of America. We don't count when it comes to its interests. What counts is the Midwest who is selling wheat and the senator who is lobbying for more wheat to be sold to the third world, or being that wheat to be used as a hook to get bases and relations with third world. So America has softened its view towards Abiy, and it may as well coerce groups like TPLF and Oromo groups to soften their edges. And we may see this in the near future, not too long. TDF and TPLF has been lukewarm lately because I believe that the US government has talked to them and did some exchange trade between food coming to them and them being a bit silent. And I understand that. I think they talked to some Oromo groups. I don't know exactly how they talked to them, but we will find that. Having said that, I think there's a little glimmer of hope. I want to end on my last word, which is what's emerging from Somalia. I think it is in a way, to see today, and I wish the late Masfum al-Mariam was alive, who, in support of the Derg, penned a small leaflet or pamphlet calling Somalia the problem child of Africa. I think I'm just wondering, and I put that language in an article that will be coming out soon on a magazine. I wonder what he would say today if he was alive and compares Ethiopia with Somalia. Would he be saying that Ethiopia, the embarrassment of the world? Would he be saying that Ethiopia that uses woman rape as a mass, weapon? Would he be saying, as the scale said, Ethiopia, that houses the largest internal displaced people of its own people? Would he be saying that Ethiopia that could not support its own son, who was given one of the best jobs and responsibilities in the world, no matter what he believes? I am just wondering where Ethiopia is headed to, and it's not headed to a good place. Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal. Yosef, the final thought is yours.
All right. Yeah. Yes. Sure, for sure enough, it's not only the Ethiopians that are saying up to now that there is no replacement to the Abiy, at least the ones that matter right now. But as Faisal also mentioned, I believe the main culprit in this case is the US. The US sees no replacement to the Abiy. For some odd reason, they have believed that from the very beginning up to now. So to me, all this talk that we are having about evil, I said it started in Asmara and it will end in Asmara. If Asmara goes, then also Abiy also goes. That's my belief. And there is hints of what is going on in Asmara now, because the entire nation of Eritrea is now in a panic mode. It's in a panic mode. As I said, the Achilles heels of Eritrea is its demography. Already now, in these 20 months, tens of thousands of Eritreans have made it to Sudan. And almost all of them are either army deserters or conscription evaders. The number that I was given was around 70,000 have already made it. And there is the man that I talked to in Sudan said that he could almost create a division every month. We see battalion leaders, lower official, lower level officials, and regular soldiers flocking to Sudan every month in their thousands. Now, Eritrea is scared precisely because of that. It cannot afford two things. It cannot afford war against Tigray without the help of Ethiopia. And that's why now it's scared because it has been isolated. And it doesn't count on the support of the Amharas, who were their first allies, or the Ethiopian army. So it's really scared for that reason. And the second reason why it's scared is precisely because if war started, and if there is an incursion into Eritrea, even a small incursion into Eritrea, there will be an economic collapse, because the entire money that it gets, almost the entire money that it gets right now is from mining companies, and all the mining companies will pack up and go. That is its greatest fear. The second one is, even if there is no war, if the states that of no war, no peace, but in a way that is not resolved, in the kind of a conflict stage that it finds right now, with Tigrayans on the other side and the Eritreans on the other side of the border, given that tens of thousands of Eritreans are leaving every day, then more people are leaving the army through mass exodus rather than through death or through war casualties. So now Eritrea is in real panic. I believe the end is almost coming in the case of Eritrea, and Americans also want regime change, at least in Eritrea, in the case of Eritrea. So to me, if that one, the only problem with the Americans is that they don't know how to bring this regime change, given their confusion. It's even believed that they have asked Abiy to work with others, to bring regime change in Eritrea, which he of course refused. So what that tells us, it's only the confusion of Americans that is hampering this regime change, even though they do want that regime change. If that happens, I believe that the next thing that will happen after that will be a regime change in Addis Ababa. So hopefully that will. That's my only hope. That's my only hope at this point in time. I don't expect the people of Ethiopia to rise up against Abiy or the people of Eritrea to rise up against Isaias. Thank you.
Thank you, Yosef. And I think I want to take the opportunity to announce a program on Sunday. This is with Professor Shetel Tromboll. He's a professor of peace and conflict in Oslo. And we are starting a new show that will come every other Sunday and starting this Sunday. So Horn, Peace and Conflict Thermometer, that's the name of the show. Episode 1 will be starting on Sunday, May the 29th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. So that will be live. And for this episode and for any other episodes that will come after that under Horn, Peace and Conflict Thermometer, we'll be collecting questions from our viewers. So the questions we received for this episode will cover the Maqala Addis Ababa Khartoum alliance against Asmara. Is that a possibility? That is a question we received. And then the law enforcement in Amhara. That's part of the conversation we will have on Sunday. And then realignment in Oromia and Jawar Mohammed's interview and Abiy Ahmed. That's also a topic that will be covered. The Somali factor will be one of the topics, time permitting, and Isaias Afwerki's speech. Short, no mention of Ethiopia, no mention of Wayana, and that will be also covered under the first episode of Horn, Peace and Conflict Thermometer, and that will be live at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday. And before that, tomorrow I'll be talking. We'll have live. I'm just trying to get the document live with Dr. Solomon Mazgabo in Tigrayn, ቀይሕ ባሕሪን, and it will be open for our viewers to call in. ተመልከትና ክትደውሉ ትኽእሉ ኢኹም ትግራይን ቀይሕ ባሕሪን ምስ ዶክተር ሰሎሞን መዝገቦ ጽባሕ. That was the show for today. Thank you, gentlemen, and definitely there will be a lot of developments unfolding, and we'll cover that in coming H panel. And UMD Media today reported that Abiy Ahmed and Debretsion Gabriel of Tigray, they talked over the phone recently, and the discussion we heard from our sources was focusing on upgrading the humanitarian truce from March into a ceasefire, and we also heard it covered exchange of prisoners of war, but we haven't received any details on how that was to be implemented and so on. With that, we finish today's show. Thank you for your insight and have a good one.